Hello, and welcome to Gestalt IT. My name is Tom Hollingsworth, and I am a member of the Gestalt IT community, and we are bringing you a special Future of Cloud Roundtable today, brought to you by our friends at Cisco. We just had a great presentation, a great day of presentations from their technical experts talking about some of the innovations that they've had, and we wanted to focus in on two of the future cloud innovations, specifically the UCS X Series servers and Intersight. And we wanted to talk a little bit about how each of these technologies will impact you as you move into the cloud in the future. First, though, I want to take a moment for each of our panelists to introduce themselves so you kind of know who they are and where they're coming from, and then we'll jump into today's episode, starting off with Gina.
Hi, my name is Gina Rosenthal. I founded a company called Digital Sunshine Solutions. I help people with their product marketing needs when they don't even really realize that they have them. You can find me at digitalsunshinesolutions.com or gminx on Twitter.
All right, Nathan.
Yeah, I'm Nathan Bennett. I work for a company called Sterling Computers as a cloud architect. You can find me at vnathanbennett or on my blog, nerdynate.life. But I basically try to figure out this whole cloudy mess that we all find ourselves in these days.
Ariane.
Arjan Timmerman, based out of the Netherlands. Also a cloud architect these days, although maybe I should call it an IT architect, I don't know. I do that as well as being an analyst for GigaArm and have my own firm with Max Moderator as Tech Unplugged.
Wolfgang.
So my name is Wolfgang Stief. I'm from Germany. I call myself a technology scout. I'm basically doing freelance consulting and some editing work for a website called datadisrupted.de, where I write enterprise news together with my wife in German.
All right, thank you. And I'd like to take a moment to introduce our special guests from Cisco, starting with Ravi.
Hey Tom, Ravi here, Ravi Mishra. I'm product manager for UCS X series in Cisco. I've been in Cisco from the last 17 years, in this group from the last 10 years, so happy to be here.
And Justin.
Hi, my name is Justin Barksdale. I am a technical marketing engineer in the office of the CTO on our cloud and compute business unit. I focus on all things cloudy.
Thank you very much. Let's jump into the topic of today's roundtable. So we had a lot of great presentations about some of the updates that we've seen, specifically around Intersight and UCS X series, which is a new launch from Cisco talking about some of their new generations of servers and things like that. But one of the conversations that we keep having, not just with Cisco, but in general, is this idea of cloud first and hybrid cloud. In one of our discussions earlier today, one of our friends here at Cisco brought up the idea that, if you're starting out in this world, if you're looking to, consume IT infrastructure, you're very likely going to be going cloud first. It just makes the most sense because of the consumption models, because of the skills gap. You don't have existing knowledge that you're going to have to try to retrain people on. First thing you're going to want to do is go deploy some stuff in AWS, put down a credit card, it's going to work. But that doesn't work for everybody. And that's kind of where this idea of hybrid models come into play. You have existing on-premises solutions that you kind of need to account for, and you need to figure out if those workloads make viable sense in the cloud. So I want to start off our discussion there with a question for the group, specifically for our delegates to start with. Do you see some of the advances that we've seen in things like UCS X series as that kind of bridge to start looking at more seriously moving on-premises workloads to the cloud, or is it something different?
It totally depends, as always. Now, for what I'm seeing happening with the customers that I was with for the last couple of years, I see a big difference between the large enterprise and the smaller to medium-sized businesses, in which the approach that you already mentioned, the cloud first, will resonate better with the SMBs, where the enterprises are more leaning to a hybrid first environment. So and to be honest, I've worked with customers that were in the UCS realm of things, and they literally did it like that. So they bought into more UCS, but on the other hand, bought into, in Europe, it's mostly Azure. They bought into Azure first, but they're now into AWS as well. Where with the current customer I'm at, they're going cloud first. They're getting rid of their entire data center before the end of next year. Everything needs to be gone, needs to be in Azure, and it's all there. Or it's SaaS based, but it's out of the data center. So it really depends.
And part of the thing that is driving a lot of these conversations is this historical CapEx model that we have these assets that we need to depreciate, and there's technical debt. And for every company that wants to stay on premises, you have these hybrid cloud solutions, hybrid multi-cloud even, that companies are stumbling across because maybe this database no longer has an on-premises model. There's no way for me to consume that locally. And I wonder if this would help in those situations where I have this existing technical debt that I have to service essentially until I can move forward with it. But I know that I can't just keep everything in-house anymore.
So I'm going to be the contrarian. This is shocking, I know. Like, why does everything have to go to the cloud? We're talking about architecture here, right? So the reason people go to the cloud is it's elastic, it's easier to use, you can scale it better. And a lot of those reasons are because you don't have to deal with the IT team that's responsible for doing everything. But what if you could make on-premises operations as fluid as the cloud? What if that experience for the dev teams and engineering teams could be just as easy as it is to getting something in the cloud? I think that's truly what hybrid is. What is the best place to run the application so that I get the best performance possible? And if we can architect on premises as things are architected in the cloud, that's possible. And I think that's a lot of what I heard from Cisco today is them trying to make the way that things are provisioned and configured very similar to the way things are provisioned and configured in the cloud. So I have a fundamental issue with the premise that everything's going to the cloud and we should be helping everybody go to the cloud. If that's the best place for the application, sure, but maybe that's not the best place for the application. And there's lots of reasons not to have it in the cloud.
And I think you bring up a really interesting point there, Gina, because we have heard this logic for so long that you need to go to the cloud. Whatever the answer is you need to go there. And it's when you start asking the hard questions, believe it or not, I believe that's when most cloud migrations start stalling. Not because there's not sufficient forward momentum to put things in the cloud. There are all kinds of things that we can host there. It's when you get to the sticky questions. What about this data that really shouldn't live in a public location? Why are we doing this? Not because of a marketing solution that said I needed to. And you're right. And friend of Tech Field Day, Justin Warren, had an amazing session that he did several years ago where he talked about, the reason why people move to cloud has nothing to do with this hardware being hosted or the Elastic services or anything like that. It's easier to provision things and make them go. You're removing roadblocks to enabling IT to move faster. And if someone can deliver that model on premises, it will do a lot for making hybrid cloud an actual reality. Then it doesn't matter where my data lives. Then it doesn't matter whose hardware I'm using, whether it's Microsoft's or Amazon's or Cisco's, because it all kind of works the same. And it fixes governance issues. It fixes a lot of regulatory problems. But it's really difficult to get people to jump past that original idea of, on-premises means old-fashioned, archaic config files that are written in some dead magical language. But the cloud is cool and it's shiny, and they use YAML and Yang and all kinds of cool stuff. So how do we bridge those two gaps together?
But I think that's some of what we saw today, right? So if you're able to if you're able to configure how you want something to be provisioned in a way that it happens on premises and in the same way in a different public cloud, if that's where you choose to go, you have one way to provision and configure everything. And it's all, you make the infrastructure act as code, then it kind of changes your whole perspective on cloud. What does cloud mean, and what does that actually mean? And is paying for someone to host all this for me the best use of my money and time, or is there a hybrid solution, or is there only one? It's more of a choice of how to architect the application. And if you have a way to architect the infrastructure as code, it makes it faster. It makes it more cloud-like on-prem. And in reality, you're not touching the hardware in the cloud. You are still configuring that base virtualized infrastructure. So being able to do it the same way everywhere, to me, and I think Cisco has some great starts to it with the platforms they showed us. So I think, and some great ways to watch what's going on and how the actual configurations are being consumed, and how the information and data is flowing. So I think there's a lot of things here that are able to do it, to do that hybrid you're talking about. I'm talking too much.
Well, I think from the initial statement of it depends, it leads to the credence of many different facets, right? So I think the myth of everyone's moving to cloud is very much on the commercial side of things. There are federal entities that are operating far behind where commercial is, and they're just trying to figure out how to move to a DevOps model. And that's the other part of this, right? How do we move into combining developers, or that application stack that you're referring to, Gina, and that infrastructure self-service and infrastructure as code, or any of those other solutions. And that's where Intersight really excites me, being a DevOps and automation guy. Like I was that guy that was talking to the infrastructure people that said, oh, we need this tool, or we need this tool. And I kept on asking the question, why? Why can't we just utilize these functions that have existed for years, but have never actually been implemented in these ways? And that's where I think like Intersight and UCS have this synergy that really helps develop a cloud-based model on premise, where you have this solution to deploy infrastructure that quickly, not just create a ticket and toss it into the void, hoping that eventually someone messages you back and says, hey, your server's ready.
I like to bring in another point of view. There is certainly in Europe, probably all over the world, some lack of IT engineers. And in consuming cloud services, it's just easier. So you don't have to have database engineers in your house. You don't have to have security engineers in-house, because you can consume all those services out of the cloud, which makes a stable service for your company, for your team, for your customers, without have to need all the people.
Yeah, we've spent a lot of time in our careers stabilizing things that are running on data centers that have, dirty power, or, under provisioned resources. We've spent all this time, and then somebody goes to rest in Virginia and just magically makes it all redundant and makes all of that stuff less worrisome. But the trade-off is that you kind of have to rebuild what you're using to take better advantage of those resources. So maybe then the question becomes, if I'm going to have to rebuild it all anyway, is it better to rip off the Band-Aid and just rebuild it out there? Or is there a significant advantage to rebuilding it in-house to take advantage of the things that Cisco's offering in these new platforms? And then ask the question, does it make more sense to move to the cloud for certain services? Can I keep things in-house that I want to hold on to?
So I think the first question there is really the applications. I mean, let's all be honest here. Infrastructure does not make money for a business. It's all about the applications that run and how highly available and resilient those solutions are. And so, to Jeannie's point, it all depends on where is the best place to run that application. And we see cloud native becoming a huge thing in our industry. But is that where your application is best run? I can say the same thing about cloud in terms of application framework. If you're going to develop an application, you're going to go right into a cloud native framework because it's just easier to deploy. It's easier to maintain. It's highly resilient by nature. But if you're someone who has an application that's a monolith, do you really want to refactor that application and go through that development process just so that it can be deployed? I think a lot of people really, they have these questions about, how do I get to that point? And it starts with the solutions that we saw today in terms of Intersight allowing to deploy IKS. So you have a Kubernetes solution to actually start messing around with that. Like, how does this actually interact with my applications, and how can I start developing in that area? And then on top of that, IWE integration for orchestrating, additional VM components. So in my mind, it really depends on this kind of hybrid solution that bridges the gap between virtual machines and containers and allows developers access to both so that they can start developing in both locations.
I think also, I love that idea about just playing with things. If we're looking at, if you don't even realize what a cloud native application means or what that would mean to your environment, to have your applications turned into a cloud, can you turn them into cloud native applications, or how does all of this work? Like, that is a big, huge deal. And I think finding things, and there's lots of ways now to go and discover how to make your infrastructure at code. And if you're a Cisco customer, you have tons of ways to go look and play with this and figure this out with the applications that they have. So go find out what this actually means before you can even make a statement of, let's just send it all to cloud, because that's an expensive proposition, or let's keep it all on-prem. That might be the wrong question. So understanding how cloud native applications work, which I think is just going to be how the way applications work, in several years, that's more important right now. Get started there.
I wanted to give our friends from Cisco a chance to maybe jump in and kind of offer their perspective on where they see the cloud developing and how these solutions are going to help out there, because we've raised a lot of great questions. And we have mentioned that Cisco does have solutions to kind of help there, but maybe kind of your expert insight on specifically where these technologies can help on that journey might be good to kind of shed light on things.
Sure. I think the first thing is, we look at cloud as an operating model, not necessarily a location. And so, Gina kind of hit it on the nail on the head when we talk about making our infrastructure on premises operate in the same way that we or get consumed in the same way that we consume a public cloud is really, like the holy grail of what we're trying to build out. If we can do that, then the advantages of a public cloud provider really go away for a vast majority of workloads. I wouldn't say for every workload. I think there's workloads that will always be better utilized in public cloud. But for a lot of workloads, things that can't be refactored, things that maybe there's governmental, regulatory, or whatever reasons that I can't put it in public cloud. I think being able to keep them on premises and have them operate on infrastructure that acts like a cloud provider is our goal.
And just to add that, we need to consider the application requirement for the resource also. We all think that all applications are built in the same way. They need exact same resources and all are virtual. So I can just throw in some CPU memory and they will magically work. That's not the case. That's not the reality. There are applications which requires very specific resources, whether it's NVMe storage, whether it's more bandwidth on the Ethernet side, or or you have GPUs and accelerators and all, it's not easy to get those resources and get it into the cloud. Cloud, as Justin mentioned, is more like operating model, the operating experience. But most of the time, we do not look at the application perspective, where I'm looking into finding those resources, and I'm finding latency is so high between these two different nodes because I don't have those resources available. On-prem, I can build those very easily with the security aspect, with compliance aspect, with the performance aspect, what I'm looking at. So I think that's where the architecture has to be end-to-end. It's not only the operating model, the underlying infrastructure needs to be built. We can't just think that, oh, abstraction layer of hypervisor will provide everything to you. No, that's not the case, right? It has to work together.
I think that we've discussed quite a few things about the way that Cisco is kind of looking at the cloud, and I think we've raised a lot of really important questions that people need to be asking themselves. You know, applications aren't built the same way. What kind of stability do you need for your services? How do your workloads look? I want to go around and I want to ask our panelists one question. I want you to answer it for the audience at home. What is the one thing that you need to be considering if the words hybrid cloud come across your desk as a project that you need to be working on? One thing that is super important that you need to understand before you even try to go down this path. And I'm going to start with Wolfgang.
So I would certainly look into data sovereignty and data security.
It's a great answer. Nathan, what do you think? What's the one thing that people need to be looking at when it comes to hybrid cloud?
Yeah, so I'm an automation guy, so my first instinct, and I'll take this to the grave, which is infrastructure as code, and that is something that I think is core. So,
Ariane, what's the one thing about hybrid cloud that we need to know?
I think Wolfgang already said it, but let's pick something else. Probably the right integration between the two different things.
Gina, what do you think? What is the one thing that we need to be considering with hybrid cloud?
Can you please tell me what the heck you mean by hybrid cloud?
I think that's a pretty fair question. You definitely want to define what a hybrid cloud is before you start trying to build resources into it, which may be the reason why we got ourselves into this mess in the first place. Ravi, what's something that people need to consider when they're thinking about a hybrid cloud project?
I think it's the application. Most of the time we rotate what your application needs. If you understand that whether you want the hybrid, you want the cloud operating model or multi-cloud model where you have different cloud and running your application on different clouds or on-prem, I think that's what dictates what application needs.
Justin.
I just have to piggyback off Robbie because he took mine, but certainly the application. And I think Nathan said it earlier in that infrastructure doesn't make money. It's the apps that makes the money. It's the apps that drives the business. It's the customer experience of those applications. And when you're doing hybrid cloud, choosing the best location, the best method to deploy that application is really what you should be thinking about.
Well, I think that, we have quite a few people who are very much in agreement that there are a lot of aspects of hybrid cloud that you need to consider, and they're not just hardware. They're around governance, they're around definition, they're around applications. There are a lot of moving parts that you need to worry about. Now, does that mean you need to hold up your cloud migration strategy because you can't get answers to them? Well, if we wait until we're ready, we're never going to do it. But that doesn't also mean that we need to jump in with both feet without looking where we're landing. You need to consider what your cloud migration strategy is going to end up looking like. And you need to ask the right questions and get the right partners to help you. Now, Cisco makes a pretty good partnership. I know that because I've been a Cisco partner in the past. But you need to evaluate what your partnership status needs to look like. Who gives you the best opportunity to move forward with the right answers to the questions? And when you know the answers to those questions, then you can start investigating the technologies that you're going to use to make this happen. And if you do that, you're going to find that your journey to the cloud is a whole lot easier than it would be if you just started ordering SKUs from whoever told you that the cloud is the best place to be. and I'm pretty sure your stakeholders are going to be a lot happier about it too. All right, thank you very much for tuning in for this very special roundtable about the future of cloud. I want to thank our friends from Cisco for being a part of this as well as bringing it to you. And I want to thank our panelists, delegates from the Cisco Future Cloud Tech Field Day exclusive event that we had on July the 13th. If you want to see this and more great roundtables from Gestalt IT, please head over to our website at gestaltit.com. If you want to see videos from the Tech Field Day Cisco exclusive Future Cloud event, please make sure you head over to our YouTube channel at youtube.com/techfieldday, where you'll find a playlist containing all the information. And you can also head over to our Gestalt IT YouTube channel at youtube.com/gestaltitvideo to see more great roundtables, podcasts, and analysis of all great things enterprise IT. So for myself, Tom Hollingsworth, for our great friends at Cisco, our delegate community, and each and every one of you in the wider Gestalt IT and Tech Field Day communities, thank you very much for being a part of this, and we will talk to you soon.